you know it's gonna be a sad sort of affairs when there are more people at the straight pride parade than the trans censorship matters protest. Hey Whopping, are you sitting down? Well, be seated further. Your tuchus needs to be planted for the sheer magnitude of this event lest you pass out from the ginormous crowd that showed up at the transgender walkout. A whopping 100 people, a whole 100, 5 short buses of people showed up for the lamest player haters ball ever. Hate, 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 hate. Who's supposed to take this seriously when you can't even get more than 100 people to show up at your highly advertised protest? That just shows how much people like Dave Chappelle and how little they care about your bitching. And bitch they did. The organizer Ashley Marie Preston said, quote, "Dave Chappelle doesn't get to take the light from this moment," Preston told the rally crowd, adding that organizers reached out to Chappelle but were rebuffed. Other speakers called on the cheering crowd to cancel their Netflix subscriptions. Yes, let the salt flow through you. Trans people are in the middle of a holocaust, Joey Soloway told the crowd, adding, "Misogyny is gender violence," and calling out Chappelle directly.
"The circle is now complete. When I left, you were but a follower. Now you are the dictator."
Soloway also demanded that a trans person be placed on the Netflix fucking board. Preston said at the rally that organizers plan to call out board members if there is not a change towards equity and leadership options. You have allowed this wokeness to twist your mind until now. You have become the very thing you swore to destroy. All this because Chappelle told some jokes. They're just jokes. He jokes about everybody, and you were perfectly fine with him joking about white folks in his previous specials. Didn't have a word to say until the moment he turned to you. Now it's wrong. Now you want to control what Netflix puts on their service, what happens in their headquarters, and what projects they fund. Now I'm good at anagrams, but I can't seem to get religious right out of transgender activists. I seem to be missing a couple of letters. Maybe I can borrow some from your acronym. Seriously, when did y'all become the right-wing asshats who want to censor everything? We beat them, so you took their shtick? The perpetually offended put out this list of demands, or what they call asks, since the woke left loves to redefine words, and it's just censorious nonsense. Quote, "Eliminate references/imagery of Chappelle inside of the workplace, including but not limited to murals, posters, room names, swag." So you literally want to unperson him. You're so traumatized by a comedy special you don't have to watch that you can't bear to see pictures of Dave Chappelle, so you want to erase him from existence. Overreact much? Acknowledgement that the special causes harm to the trans community and Netflix's responsibility on it, so we keep the conversation about transphobia evolving internally. Translation: we're gonna bitch and never stop bitching, and you better listen and believe. Then they make monetary demands like this one, quote, "Invest in trans and non-binary content on Netflix comparable to our total investment in transphobic content, including comparable investments in the promotion of content. The comparative class of investment should include but not be limited to works produced by Dave Chappelle, Ricky Gervais's Afterlife, etc." Right. Netflix is supposed to give the same financing to some no-name transgender project as they do major draws like Chappelle and Gervais. And I love how they just throw in Gervais in the mix like they're going to bring heat on him too. Of all the people who couldn't care less about your precious feelings, you choose Ricky Gervais? Okay. He just wrote his next comedy special. Nicely done. Then they of course demand that the powers that be in the company be replaced with transformers because of reasons. Quote, "Hire transgender content executives in leading positions and promote an inclusive environment for them. Recruit trans people for leadership roles in the company, director, VP, etc., and promote an inclusive environment for them." Whenever someone demands power, that's the last person you should ever give power. You never put someone like this in power because they will abuse it. Don't take my word for it. Just look at the nearly 100 years of the right censoring film, music, and TV. You don't give people like this power. And the cherry on top is, of course, quote, "A disclaimer before the closer, specifically saying it contains transphobic language, misogyny, homophobia, and hate speech." Of course it does. Conveniently, you left out racism because I guess dissing white people doesn't count. Now, Netflix initially backed Chappelle, which caused a little conundrum for some of the Chappelle's supporters, because Netflix put the film Cuties on their service last year, and those people were offended and wanted Netflix to pull the film, which Netflix didn't do, which pissed them off. Why does that sound so familiar? Unfortunately, none of them worked at Netflix, so they couldn't stage a 100 pussy march in protest. The transgender complaint, however, might actually have traction because they can play the victim card. That said, Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos said in his initial memo about the Chappelle special, quote, Chappelle is one of the most popular stand-up comedians today, and we have a long-standing deal with him. As with our other talent, we work hard to support their creative freedom. Even though this means there will always be content on Netflix some people believe is harmful, like Cuties, 365 Days, 13 Reasons Why, or My Unorthodox Life. And I know this statement will bother people, so let me point out that everyone has something that offends them that they don't think should exist. What you think about Cuties is what the trans community thinks about The Closer. I don't care if you don't think they're the same thing, that only proves my point. To you, one is benign and the other is offensive. To them, one is benign and the other is offensive. The lesson you should take from this is that no one is the authority on what is or isn't offensive. And if you want to have any creative freedom, you can't go around censoring people. Freedom of expression is a zero-sum proposition. You either have it or you don't. You get to make whatever you want to make, and if someone wants to publish it or distribute it, that's up to them. If you don't like it, don't buy it. Don't watch it, don't read it, don't listen to it. If you're offended that Netflix has something on their service you don't like, cancel your subscription. But the idea that you get to censor them or any creative person, no. As the late Christopher Hitchens put it, quote, "Bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that every time you violate or propose to violate the free speech of someone else, in potentia, you're making a rod for your own back." Because the other question raised is simply this: who's going to decide? To whom do you award the right to decide which speech is harmful or who is the harmful speaker? Or to determine in advance what are the harmful consequences going to be that we would know enough about in advance to prevent? To whom would you give this job? To whom are you going to award the job of being the censor? To whom would you delegate the task of deciding for you what you could read? To whom would you give the job of deciding for you, relieve you of the responsibility of hearing what you might have to hear? Do you know anyone to whom you'd give this job? Does anyone have a nominee? You mean there's no one good enough to decide what I can read or hear? I had no idea. But there's a law that says there must be such a person, or there's a subsection of some piddling law that says it. Well, the hell with the law then. It's inviting you to be liars and hypocrites and to deny what you evidently know already. About the censorious instinct, we basically know all we need to know, and we've known it for a long time. It may not be determined in advance what words are apt or inapt. No one has the knowledge that would be required to make that call, and more to the point, one has to suspect the motives of those who do so. In particular, the motives of those who are determined to be offended. Those who will go through a treasure house of English in search of filthy words to satisfy themselves in some instinct about which I dare not speculate. You have to be very careful about playing this game of censoring things you don't like because, as you can see with the list of ridiculous trans demands, it doesn't stop. Once unleashed, that censorious tendency in people becomes emboldened, and it won't take much for it to manifest itself in nefarious ways, like how those offended by Cuties are also offended by content involving gay or trans kids because, degeneracy. Yes, I know you're offended. Search your social media feed or read the comments on my video about Pixar's Luca. You know it to be true. Speaking of what we all know to be true, Ted Sarandos is getting a little tight in the panties. He said to the Hollywood Reporter about his original defense of Chappelle, quote, "I should have first and foremost acknowledged in those emails that a group of our employees were in pain and that they were really feeling hurt from a business decision that we made. And I, instead of acknowledging that first, I went into some rationales. So first of all, I'd say those emails lacked humanity, in which I like to and I do generally communicate with our teams. It's funny how a handful of employees who, according to Sarandos, have never worked in the office because they were hired during the Wu flu, so they don't know anybody, those handful of people have this dude backtracking, but tens of thousands of people complaining about Cuties and canceling their Netflix accounts? Bupkis. No backtracking, no rethinking decisions. Priorities, I guess. Or hypocrisy. Same difference. Honestly, y'all have become the new right wing. That's why they're so mad at you, because for the first time, you're actually beating them using their own shtick. Anytime you'd like to straighten up that backbone, Ted, I'll be here. But I'm not crouching down to look you in the eyes. Either you support creative freedom or you don't. If you do, then tell these sensitive faux Nancys to have a Coke and a smile and shut the fuck up. If you don't, tuck your lady balls behind your trans dick and just quit. Either stand up to these people or back down. Stop this whipple waffling about their feelings. They're using their feelings as a weapon and you know it. Stop giving into their bullshit because that's all it is. They're not really offended. They just want control. It's no different than someone going, "It's the gay agenda," when the story has a gay character in it. You don't have to entertain that nonsense. Treat these people like you treated the critics of Cuties. Ignore them. And literally the same thing will happen. Nothing. You're going to lose a few employees that you can easily replace, but at least you can hold to your principle of supporting creative freedom. Or you can bend the knee and look like a massive hypocrite since you didn't remove cuties even though it prompted more outrage. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.